In a wealthy man's luxurious mansion, a dark secret is kept, but a parrot, the only loyal witness, saw everything and is about to reveal the truth about the hidden cruelty. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the Albuquerque mansion, bathing the polished marble and antique furniture in a golden glow. In the living room, where an ornate golden cage housed Luro, the family's true parrot, the atmosphere seemed deceptively tranquil. Luro, with his vibrant green feathers and a red ring around his neck, observed everything with intelligent, curious eyes. He was more than a pet. He was a family member, a silent observer of years of routines and, more recently, of secrets. Ilara, Arthur the millionaire's wife, descended the stairs with calculated grace. Her blonde hair was impeccably styled, and her blue silk dress flowed with every movement. She was the picture of elegance, but behind her polished smile, a cold ambition seethed. Her gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on the parrot, who stared back unblinking. "Good morning, Luro," she said, her voice melodic but devoid of genuine warmth. The parrot tilted his head, a gesture Ilara interpreted as acknowledgement, but which was, in fact, a silent analysis. She walked over to the small side table next to the armchair where Arthur's father, Mr. Ricardo, usually sat. Ricardo, an elderly and frail man, depended on a series of medications to control his blood pressure and other ailments. Ilara knew this very well. Her morning routine included preparing her father-in-law's breakfast and ensuring he took his medicine. However, in recent months, this routine had transformed into a macabre ritual. Today, Ilara picked up the bottle of blue pills, the most important ones for Ricardo's heart. She twirled it in her hands, her lips curving into an almost imperceptible smile. The sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway made her act quickly. With an agile movement, she opened the bottle and, instead of placing the pills on Ricardo's tray, discreetly emptied them into her palm. Her eyes gleamed with a dark intent. Luro, from his cage, watched every detail. His dark eyes followed the movement of Ilara's hand as she turned towards the brushed metal wastebasket, hidden behind a fern pot. With a quick, almost imperceptible gesture, she let the pills drop to the bottom of the wastebasket, immediately covering them with a used tissue. The sound was a whisper, almost inaudible, but Luro registered it. "Done," Ilara murmured to herself, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. She then picked up an empty bottle and placed it on the tray, as if it had been used. Another day. At that exact moment, Arthur entered the room, cell phone to his ear and a worried expression. He was a businessman, his mind always on millions and contracts, and he rarely noticed the subtle details of domestic life. Yes, I want the full report by noon," he was saying into the phone, oblivious to the tension in the air. "There's no room for error." Ilara smiled at him, a sweet and innocent smile. "Good morning, dear. Your father is still sleeping. I prepared his breakfast." Arthur nodded, distracted. "Great, Ilara. You're an angel." As Arthur walked away towards the kitchen, still on the phone, Luro, who had remained silent throughout the scene, began to stir in his cage. He swayed his head from side to side, as if processing what he had just witnessed. His eyes fixed on the wastebasket, then on Ilara, who was now tidying the sofa cushions. Suddenly, with surprising clarity, Luro's voice echoed through the room, perfectly imitating the quick, whispering tone Ilara had used moments earlier. "Hide the bottle! Hide the bottle!" Ilara froze, her body stiffened, and the smile on her face dissolved into a mask of shock and irritation. She turned sharply to the cage, her eyes narrow and dangerous. Luro stared back at her, his dark eyes gleaming with an intelligence she had never noticed before. "Shut up, Luro!" she hissed, her voice low and menacing, but the parrot, oblivious to her fury, merely repeated louder and with an almost rhythmic cadence, "Hide the bottle! Hide the bottle!" Arthur, from the kitchen, heard the commotion. "Luro's excited today, isn't he, Ilara?" he called out, laughing. Ilara forced a smile, but her gaze at Luro promised silent vengeance. The parrot, the sole witness to the cruelty, had begun to speak, and the truth, like a caged bird, was about to fly free. Arthur's laughter echoed from the kitchen, muffling Ilara's silent fury. She forced a smile, but her eyes, fixed on Luro, promised silent vengeance. The parrot, oblivious to the threat, swayed his head, as if pleased with his performance. Arthur reappeared in the room, the phone finally disconnected. "Luro's chatty today," he commented, picking up a cup of coffee from the coffee table. "What was he saying? Something about a bottle?" Ilara laughed, a sound a little too high-pitched. "Oh, you know how he is. He must have heard some TV show or something. He loves to imitate random sounds." She approached the cage, a forced smile on her face. "Isn't that right, Luro? You're a silly bird." Luro tilted his head, his dark eyes fixed on her. He didn't repeat the phrase, but the tension in the air was palpable for Ilara. She felt the bird's gaze like an accusation. At that moment, a faint groan came from the hallway. Ricardo, Arthur's father, appeared at the entrance to the room, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked frailer than usual, his steps dragging and his face pale. "Good morning, my son." "Ilara," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I don't feel very well today. My head is spinning." Arthur dropped his coffee cup, concern replacing distraction. "Father, are you all right? Ilara, did you give him his medicine?" Ilara hurried towards Ricardo, offering him her arm. "Of course, dear. I prepared his breakfast and left the medicine on the tray, as always, but he hasn't eaten yet." She cast a significant glance at Arthur, as if it were Ricardo's fault for not taking the medication. "Perhaps he needs a little more rest." Ricardo shook his head, confused. "Medicine? I don't remember taking anything today. I'm sure I didn't see the blue bottle." Arthur frowned. "Father, you have to take your medicine, especially the heart one. Ilara, are you sure you left the blue bottle there?" Ilara picked up the empty tray she had left on the side table and showed it to Arthur. "Look, dear, the bottle is empty. He must have taken it and simply forgotten. Age, you know." She smiled at Ricardo, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, father-in-law. I'll prepare some tea for you." Luro, from his cage, watched the scene with unusual intensity. His eyes followed Ilara as she walked away towards the kitchen with the tray. Suddenly, he flapped his wings, and his voice resonated again, louder and clearer. "Hide the bottle! Hide the bottle! Throw it away! Throw it away!" Arthur froze. The phrase, "throw it away," was new, and Luro's tone seemed urgent. He looked from the cage to the empty tray in Ilara's hand, then to his father, who was now sitting heavily on the sofa, his head in his hands. Ilara stopped, her body rigid. She turned slowly, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Luro, that's enough!" she hissed, her voice low and full of contained rage. Arthur felt a chill. Ilara's reaction was far stronger than necessary for a chattering parrot. He had never seen her so tense because of Luro. "What is it, Ilara?" Arthur asked, his voice more serious. "Why are you so angry with Luro? He's just repeating what he hears." Ilara forced another smile, trying to regain her composure. "He's just getting on my nerves, dear, and father is feeling unwell. We don't need any more noise." She approached the cage, her movements calculated. "Luro, be quiet now, or you won't get your favorite fruit today." The parrot stared at her, and for an instant Arthur swore he saw defiance in the bird's eyes. "Hide the bottle! Throw it away!" Luro repeated, this time with an almost triumphant tone. Arthur felt a knot in his stomach. That wasn't just a parrot repeating random sounds. The phrase, Ilara's reaction, his father's confusion about the medicine. An uncomfortable piece of the puzzle began to click into place in his mind. "Ilara," Arthur said, his voice calm but with a new authority. Where did you throw away Father's medicine bottle? Elara paled. I didn't throw anything away, Arthur. I told you. He took the medicine. The bottle was empty. She stammered, and her gaze darted towards the wastebasket hidden behind the fern pot. Luro, as if understanding the direction of Elara's gaze, stirred again. Wastebasket, wastebasket, hide the bottle in the wastebasket. Arthur's heart pounded. He looked at Elara, who now seemed like an ice statue, and then at the wastebasket. The truth, once a whisper, now began to scream in his mind. Arthur's blindness was about to be cured, and the sight would be painful. He felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. That wasn't Luro repeating random television sounds. That was an accusation, clear and undeniable, coming from the only witness no one would expect. Arthur turned to Elara, who stood pale, wide-eyed, fixed on the wastebasket. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by Ricardo's gasping breaths on the sofa and the rustle of Luro's wings. Elara, Arthur's voice was a dangerous whisper. What have you done? Elara tried to regain her composure, a forced, trembling smile appearing on her lips. Arthur, dear, don't be ridiculous. Luro is just chattering. He doesn't know what he's saying. She tried to approach him, extending her hand, but Arthur recoiled, his eyes fixed on the wastebasket. With slow, deliberate steps, Arthur walked to the fern pot. Each step was heavy, as if he were treading on broken glass. Elara followed him with her gaze, her face contorting into a mixture of panic and fury. Arthur, no! There's nothing there, I swear! Her voice was louder now, desperate, but Arthur didn't hear her. He bent down, ignoring the brushed metal wastebasket, and reached his hand to the bottom where Luro had pointed. His fingers fumbled, and then he felt something small and hard. He pulled it out, and there it was, Ricardo's bottle of blue pills, almost full, hidden under a crumpled tissue. Arthur's world collapsed. He held the bottle in his palm, the weight of the pills seeming to crush his heart. The blue color, once a symbol of hope for his father's health, was now the color of betrayal. He looked at the bottle, then at the empty bottle Elara had shown him, and finally at her face, which was now completely devoid of any pretense. Elara's eyes were hard, cold, without remorse. The mask had fallen. I was going to throw them away later, Arthur. They were expired. I was going to buy new ones. The lie was so transparent, it hurt. Arthur laughed, a humorless sound, full of pain. Expired? And why didn't you tell me? Why is my father sick? Why did you leave him without his medicine, Elara? His voice rose, rage finally exploding. You deliberately made him sick. Ricardo on the sofa lifted his head, confused and frightened by Arthur's tone of voice. What's happening? My medicine. I need my medicine. Father, it's all right, Arthur said, trying to calm his father, but his eyes never left Elara. No, Father, it's not all right. Nothing is all right. Luro, from his cage, observed the scene with unusual stillness. He didn't repeat the phrases, but his dark eyes seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Elara stepped forward, her voice now a venomous whisper. You're going to believe a parrot, Arthur. A stupid bird instead of your own wife, after everything I've done for you, for this house, for your father. You did for my father. Arthur stood up, the medicine bottle still in his hand. You were killing him, Elara, slowly. You wanted him to die. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable, her face contorted. No, I didn't want to. I just wanted him to stop being a burden. He's old, sick, and he only gives us expenses. He's stopping us from living. Her words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. The cruelty, the coldness, the raw ambition. He had never seen her like this. The woman he loved, whom he thought he knew, was a monstrous stranger. A burden. Arthur could barely speak, his voice choked with repulsion. He's my father. He's the reason I have all of this. And you? You saw him as an obstacle? He shook his head, incredulous. I can't believe it. I can't believe you would do something like this. Ricardo, who had heard Ilara's last words, let out a faint groan. His eyes filled with tears, and he cowered on the sofa, the image of fragility and pain. Arthur felt an overwhelming wave of guilt. He had been blind, too busy with his business, to see the evil growing in his own home, under his own roof. His father was suffering due to his negligence. "Ilara," Arthur said, his voice now cold and sharp, devoid of any emotion but contempt. "Get out of my house, now." Ilara looked at him, a mixture of defiance and desperation in her eyes. "You can't do this. I'm your wife. I have rights." "You have no right to anything, Ilara," Arthur replied, pointing to the door. "You tried to harm my father. That is unforgivable. Leave, or I'll call the police." The mention of the police made Ilara hesitate. She knew she was cornered. Her eyes flashed with hatred, but she turned, grabbed her purse, and without a word, marched out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Arthur watched her go, feeling a chilling emptiness. The mansion, once a symbol of his success and happiness, now seemed like a mausoleum of his own blindness. He knelt beside his father, who was still trembling. "Father," he said, his voice choked. "Forgive me. I didn't see. I'm so sorry." He held the medicine bottle. "We're going to make you well." Luro, from his cage, let out a soft chirp, almost a lament. The truth had flown free, but freedom came at a high price. Ricardo's rescue had begun, but Arthur's family was in ruins. The silence that followed Ilara's departure was heavy, almost suffocating. Broken only by Ricardo's muffled sobs and the distant rustle of tree leaves outside, it was an echo of the devastation that had befallen the mansion. Arthur, kneeling beside the sofa, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He held the medicine bottle like a newfound treasure, but also as a bitter reminder of his own failure. "Father," Arthur repeated, his voice choked with emotion and overwhelming guilt. He picked up a glass of water from the coffee table and with trembling hands opened the bottle. "Let's take your medicine now. You're going to be all right." Ricardo, with swollen red eyes, looked up at his son. There was a mixture of fear, confusion, and painful understanding in his expression. He extended his weak hand, accepting the small blue pills Arthur offered him. With difficulty, he swallowed them with the water, the liquid trickling from the corner of his mouth. The simple act seemed monumental, a first step in a long and uncertain journey of recovery. Arthur helped his father recline again, adjusting the cushions with a tenderness he hadn't shown in a long time, lost in his frantic routine. Guilt gnawed at him like acid. How could he have been so blind, so absorbed in his business, in his own life of luxury and ambition, that he hadn't noticed the cruelty settling under his own roof, right under his nose? The image of Ilara, with her calculating coldness and venomous words, burned in his mind. The woman he loved, whom he thought he knew, was a mirage, a cruel and dangerous illusion. "I'm so sorry, Father," Arthur murmured, holding Ricardo's wrinkled hand, feeling the fragility of his touch. "I should have seen. I should have protected you from all of this." Ricardo squeezed his son's hand, a weak gesture, but laden with forgiveness and unconditional love. You're here now, my son," he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak, but with a sweetness that broke Arthur's heart. "That's what matters." His father's words were both a balm and a knife. Arthur felt tears well up, hot and bitter, but he held them back. It was no time for weakness. It was time to act, to repair the damage, to rebuild what had been destroyed. His soft chirp, once a lament, now seemed to carry a tone of relief, almost of approval. He had fulfilled his mission. The truth, however painful, had been revealed, and justice, though belated, was beginning to take shape. Arthur stood up, his mind beginning to process the flood of events and the decisions that needed to be made. Ilara was gone, yes, but that was just the beginning. He needed to ensure Ricardo received the best possible care. He would call the family doctor immediately, explain the situation, request a full evaluation and an urgent treatment plan. And then there would be legal consequences. Ilara couldn't simply disappear after what she had done. Attempting to deprive an elderly person of their medication to let them waste away was a serious crime, and Arthur would not allow her to escape unpunished. He looked around the room, the mansion's opulence now seeming empty and cold, devoid of any human warmth. Every object, every piece of art, every expensive piece of furniture seemed to carry the echo of betrayal and his own blindness. The house he had built with so much effort, which he thought was a sanctuary of happiness and security, had become a prison for his own father, a stage for cruelty. "Father," Arthur said, his voice now firm, filled with a new and unwavering determination, "I will take care of you. From now on, you won't be alone, I promise, and we will make sure Ilara pays for this." Ricardo smiled weakly, a tear tracing a path from the corner of his eye. It was a smile of exhaustion, but also of renewed hope, of a burden finally lifted. Arthur picked up the phone, his fingers already dialing Dr. Almeida's number. As he waited for the call to be answered, his eyes fixed on Luro. The parrot, once just a noisy pet, had become the unexpected hero, the silent guardian of the truth. He had been the voice of Arthur's conscience, the catalyst for the revelation of unimaginable cruelty. "Thank you, Luro," Arthur whispered, and for an instant it seemed the parrot tilted his head in acknowledgement, as if understanding the gratitude in his words. The call was answered. "Dr. Almeida, it's Arthur. I need you to come to the mansion immediately. It's about my father. It's urgent." Arthur's voice was calm, but the urgency was palpable, the pain and anger contained. He knew that the battle for his father's health and for justice was just beginning. The rebuilding of his life, of his family, would be a long and painful process, but he was ready to face it. The blindness had ended. The vision, however painful, had finally arrived, and with it the strength to fight. Arthur hung up the phone, his hand still gripping the device, as if the strength of his determination could be transmitted through the plastic. Dr. Almeida promised to arrive in less than an hour, his grave and concerned voice on the other end of the line, echoing the seriousness of the situation. Arthur knew it wouldn't be easy to explain everything, but the truth, however shocking, needed to be told. He turned to his father, who now seemed a little calmer, though still pale and frail. Ricardo's eyes were half closed, and a more regular breathing indicated that the medicine might already be starting to take effect, or perhaps it was just the relief of having his son by his side. Arthur sat on the edge of the sofa, taking his father's hand again, caressing it gently. "You're going to be all right, father," he repeated, more to himself than to Ricardo. Guilt was still a knot in his stomach, but the anger against Ilara began to solidify into a cold resolve. It was no longer a matter of uncontrolled emotion, but of justice. Luro, from his cage, let out a soft trill, almost a murmur. Arthur looked at the bird, and a sad smile appeared on his lips. "You were the only one who saw, weren't you, Luro?" he whispered. "The only one who tried to warn me." The parrot tilted his head, his dark, intelligent eyes fixed on Arthur, as if understanding every word. It was a strange connection, but real. The mansion, once filled with a luxury Arthur associated with happiness, now seemed like the stage of a silent tragedy. Every expensive object, every painting on the walls, every opulent piece of furniture seemed to mock his former blindness. How could he have been so naive, so absorbed in his empire that he hadn't noticed the rot growing in his own home? He picked up his cell phone again, but this time not to call a doctor. He needed a lawyer, someone who could guide him on the next legal steps. The idea of publicly exposing his wife's betrayal and malice was painful, but his father's protection came first. While waiting for Dr. Almeida's arrival, Arthur began to tidy the room, clearing away the vestiges of the confrontation. The medicine bottle, now empty, lay on the coffee table, a bitter trophy of the truth. He put it away, knowing it would be crucial evidence. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the mansion, breaking the tense silence. Arthur opened the door to Dr. Almeida, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and tired eyes. "Arthur, what happened? Your voice on the phone. It worried me." "Come in, doctor," Arthur said, his voice controlled. "It's my father, and it's a complicated story." Dr. Almeida entered, his eyes sweeping the room and stopping on Ricardo, who was now more alert but still visibly weak. The doctor approached the sofa, picking up his briefcase. "Ricardo, how do you feel?" Ricardo tried to smile, but the effort was visible. "A little better, doctor. Arthur gave me the medicine." As Dr. Almeida began to examine Ricardo, checking his blood pressure, heart rate, and asking a few questions, Arthur stepped back a little, observing. He felt a pang of hope seeing the doctor's care, but the image of Ilara, with her cold ambition, still haunted his thoughts. "Arthur, I need to speak with you privately," Dr. Almeida said after a few minutes, standing up and gesturing towards the library door. In the library, with the door closed, Arthur began to recount the events, from his father's inexplicable illness to Lauro's phrases and the discovery of the medicine hidden by Ilara. "Doctor," Almeida listened with growing seriousness, his eyes widening slightly in shock. "So, she was deliberately depriving him of his medication?" The doctor asked, his voice low and incredulous. "Yes, doctor," she admitted it. "She said he was a burden," Arthur replied, his voice choked with repulsion. "I threw her out of the house." Dr. Almeida shook his head, visibly shaken. This is terrible, Arthur. Ricardo is very weak. The lack of essential medication for his cardiac and neurological condition has left him in a critical state. We'll need more in-depth tests, perhaps even hospitalization for a few days to stabilize and monitor him closely." Arthur felt a tightening in his chest. Hospitalization, the gravity of his father's situation hit him with full force again. "I'll do whatever it takes, doctor, whatever it takes." "He needs constant care, Arthur, and a lot of emotional support," the doctor continued. "I believe the emotional shock also contributed to his decline." "I'll be here for him," Arthur promised, his voice firm. "And Ilara, she will pay for this. I guarantee it." Arthur's vision was clear now. The pain of betrayal was immense, but his father was the priority. The fight would be long, but he was ready. The mansion, once a stage of illusions, would now be a battlefield for recovery and justice. In the library, a heavy silence hung between Arthur and Dr. Almeida. The doctor, with a grave expression, closed his briefcase and looked at Arthur with a seriousness that left no room for doubt. "Arthur, we cannot waste time. Ricardo needs to be hospitalized immediately. The deprivation of essential medication for his heart and neurological condition has left him in a very delicate state. We need constant monitoring, detailed examinations, and an intensive stabilization plan." Arthur nodded, his face tense. The word hospitalization echoed in his mind, a cruel reminder of the gravity of the situation. "I understand. Doctor, do whatever it takes. Which hospital? I can arrange for a private ambulance, the best team." "Santa Clara Hospital has an excellent cardiology unit, and they are prepared for cases like your father's. I will make the arrangements for his admission myself and will call the ambulance now. In the meantime, try to calm him. He will be scared, but it's for his own good." Arthur felt a knot in his throat. Seeing his father, so strong and resilient, now so frail and dependent, was a searing pain. He left the library, his heart heavy, and returned to the living room, where Ricardo lay on the sofa, his eyes half closed, but now more conscious. "Father," Arthur said, sitting down beside him again, taking his hand. "Doctor Almeida thinks it's best for you to go to the hospital for a few days, just to ensure you recover completely, so the doctors can look after you closely." Ricardo opened his eyes, a flicker of fear in his tired gaze. "Hospital? But I don't want to go, my son. I want to stay here with you." "I know, Father, I know," Arthur murmured, caressing his wrinkled hand, "but it's important. It's for you to get strong again. I'll be there with you every day. I won't leave you alone, not for a minute, I promise." Arthur's voice was soft, yet firm, conveying a reassurance Ricardo seemed to desperately need. The elderly man sighed, a weak and resigned sound. "If you think it's for the best, my son, it is for the best, Father. Dr. Almeida is already calling the ambulance. They'll be here soon." As Dr. Almeida made the necessary calls, Arthur remained by his father's side, talking softly, trying to distract and reassure him. He spoke of future plans, of recovery, of how they would rebuild everything. But behind the comforting words, Arthur's mind seethed with rage and determination. Ilara, her image, cold and calculating, still haunted him. The cruelty of her actions was something he would never forgive. He would not only ensure his father's recovery, but also make Ilara face the legal consequences of her actions. He had already decided that as soon as his father was stabilized in the hospital, he would call his lawyer to initiate proceedings. The Parrot, who had been the catalyst for all the truth, now seemed like a silent guardian. His dark eyes fixed on Arthur and Ricardo. Arthur looked at him, a sad smile on his lips. "You did your part, Luro," he whispered. "Now it's my turn." The distant sound of a siren broke the afternoon silence. The ambulance was arriving. Arthur felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The relief that help was on its way, the apprehension for what the future held for his father. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. Arthur opened the door to a team of paramedics who entered the mansion with stretchers and equipment. Dr. Almeida quickly briefed them on Ricardo's condition. With care and professionalism, they transferred Ricardo to the stretcher, monitoring his vital signs every step of the way. "I'm going with him," Arthur told the paramedics, his voice firm. As they carried Ricardo out of the mansion, Arthur cast a final glance at the living room. The opulence that once defined that space now seemed empty, devoid of any meaning. The house he had built with so much effort, which he thought was a sanctuary of happiness and security, had become a stage for cruelty. Luro, from his cage, let out a soft chirp like a farewell. Arthur followed the stretcher to the ambulance, his father's hand firmly in his. The journey to the hospital was just the beginning of a long and arduous battle. But Arthur was ready. The vision, however painful, had finally arrived, and with it, the strength to fight not only for his father's recovery, but also for the justice Ilara deserved. The distant sound of the siren grew sharper, increasing in volume until the emergency vehicle stopped in front of the mansion, its lights flashing in an urgent rhythm that broke the afternoon's quiet. Arthur opened the door to a team of paramedics, 2 men and a woman, who entered the mansion with stretchers and equipment. Their movements were swift and efficient, their voices calm and professional. "Doctor." Almeida quickly briefed them on Ricardo's condition, providing a brief history and the suspicion of medication deprivation. With care and professionalism, the paramedics approached Ricardo. "Mr. Ricardo, we're going to take you to the hospital so the doctors can take better care of you," one of them said in a reassuring voice. Ricardo, though still weak, tried to resist slightly. "But I don't want to go," he murmured, his eyes seeking Arthur's. "Father, please," Arthur intervened, holding Ricardo's hand firmly. "It's for your own good. I'm going with you. I won't leave you alone." Arthur's promise seemed to calm Ricardo somewhat. With coordinated movements, the paramedics transferred him to the stretcher, monitoring his vital signs every step of the way. The sound of medical equipment, the beeping of the oximeter, The soft hum of an infusion pump filled the room, contrasting with the silent opulence of the surroundings. "I'm going with him," Arthur told the paramedics, his voice firm and unwavering. Loro, from his cage, let out a soft chirp, like a farewell, his dark eyes fixed on Arthur. Arthur nodded at the parrot, a silent acknowledgement of his loyalty. Outside, the ambulance waited, its lights flashing and the siren now silenced, but ready to resume its urgent melody. Arthur climbed into the ambulance, sitting beside the stretcher where his father lay. He held Ricardo's hand, feeling the fragility of the bones beneath his wrinkled skin. "We're going to be all right, Father," Arthur whispered, more to himself than to Ricardo, who seemed to have fallen asleep or was in a state of semi-consciousness. "I'm going to take care of you." The ambulance door closed and the vehicle departed, its lights flashing and the siren once again echoing down the street, taking Ricardo to Santa Clara Hospital. Arthur watched the landscape pass by the window, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the events of the last few hours, the shocking revelation, the fury he had felt, the pain of betrayal. Ilara. Her name was poison on his tongue. It wouldn't just be a divorce, but a formal accusation. Upon arriving at the hospital, the emergency team was already waiting. Ricardo was quickly taken to the cardiology unit, where a team of doctors and nurses awaited him. Arthur was instructed to wait in the waiting room, but he refused to leave his father's side until the doctors assured him that he was in good hands and that there was nothing more he could do at that moment. "We'll do our best, Mr. Arthur," a doctor said with an understanding look. "He is in a delicate state, but we will stabilize him." Finally, Arthur was led to a waiting room, an impersonal space with cold chairs and the characteristic smell of disinfectant. He picked up his cell phone, his hands trembling slightly. Not to call Ilara, nor friends. He dialed the number of his lawyer, Dr. Mendez, a man known for his shrewdness and discretion. "Dr. Mendez, I need your help," Arthur said, his voice hoarse but laden with cold determination. "It's about Ilara, and about my father. I have a story for you that will shock you." Arthur gripped his cell phone tightly, his voice hoarse, but each word laden with a cold determination he hadn't known he possessed. On the other end of the line, Dr. Mendez, an experienced and usually imperturbable lawyer, listened in silence, the prolonged pause indicating his shock. "Dr. Mendez, I need your help," Arthur repeated, the urgency in his tone unmistakable. "It's about Ilara and about my father." There was a sigh from the other end. "Arthur, you sound distressed. What happened? Is it about Ricardo?" "I heard he wasn't well." "He wasn't well because Ilara was slowly poisoning him," Arthur blurted out without preamble. The brutality of the statement made the lawyer gasp. "She hid my father's medicine, Dr. Mendez. His heart medicine. She wanted him to die." A heavy silence settled, broken only by the distant beep of some medical equipment in the waiting room. Arthur could almost feel the lawyer's brain working, processing the gravity of the accusation. "Arthur, this is an extremely serious allegation. Do you have proof?" Mendez's voice was now graver, more professional. "I have a witness," Arthur replied, a bitter smile on his lips. "A parrot, Luro. He saw Ilara throw the medication away and started repeating, 'Hide the bottle.' That's how I found out. I found the empty bottles in her wastebasket, hidden under other debris." Dr. Mendez was silent for another moment, digesting the peculiarity of the evidence. "A parrot. I see. Well, that's unusual, but not impossible to use in context. Arthur, you're talking about divorce, right? And perhaps a civil suit for damages." "No, Dr. Mendez," Arthur corrected, his voice firm. "I'm talking about a criminal prosecution. Attempted murder, negligence, and elder abuse. I want her to pay for every day of suffering my father endured. I want her to face justice to its fullest extent. Arthur, this is a long and difficult road. The evidence needs to be irrefutable. We need medical reports that prove the deprivation of medication and its correlation with your father's worsening health. We need more than a parrot's testimony, however much it was the trigger. I understand, and I will get all of that. My father is now in the cardiology unit at Santa Clara. The doctors are already aware of the suspicion. They will conduct the necessary tests. As soon as we have the reports, I want you to file the complaint. And of course, the divorce. But that is secondary now. Right. Understood. Arthur, I need you to meet me as soon as possible. Tomorrow morning, if you can. Bring everything you have. The bottles, any medical records you might have at home, anything that could be relevant. And do not confront Ilara. Do not say a word to her about this. Let me handle the legal side. Don't worry, Dr. Mendez, I have nothing more to say to her. She doesn't know that I know, and she won't know until it's too late. Arthur hung up, feeling an enormous weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a wave of adrenaline and purpose. He put away his cell phone, his eyes fixed on the door of the cardiology unit. The wait was agonizing, but he refused to succumb to despair. His father needed him, and he would be there. Minutes dragged on, turning into an hour. Finally, a doctor with a tired but gentle demeanor emerged from the unit and approached Arthur. Mr. Arthur, I'm Dr. Helena. Your father, Mr. Ricardo, is stable for now. We managed to stabilize the arrhythmia, and he is receiving the necessary medication. He is very weak, and initial tests confirm a severe cardiac decompensation aggravated by the apparent lack of regular medication. We will keep him under intensive observation for at least 48 hours. He is sleeping now, under mild sedation for comfort. Arthur felt a momentary relief, but the gravity of the doctor's words brought him back to reality. Will he recover, Doctor? Dr. Helena sighed. We'll do our best, Mr. Arthur. He is a strong man, but age and his heart condition are risk factors. The good news is that he is here now, and we are acting. The team is aware of your suspicion regarding the interruption of his medication, and this will be internally investigated and documented for any future proceedings. Thank you, Doctor. Can I see him? For a few minutes, yes, but he's sleeping deeply. Don't be alarmed if he doesn't react. Arthur followed the doctor to the room. Ricardo lay in bed, pale, with several wires and tubes connected to his body. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was the only sound. Arthur took his father's hand, feeling the coolness of his skin. I'm here, Father, he whispered, tears finally coming to his eyes. I will take care of you, and I promise that whoever did this will pay. He stayed there, watching his father, Ilara's image dancing in his mind, the opulent mansion, the empty luxury, the parrot who, with his innocence, unveiled the cruelest of truths. Arthur's blindness had ended, and with it his complacency. The battle for his father's life and for Ilara's justice was just beginning, and Arthur was ready to fight to the end. Arthur held his father's hand, feeling the coolness of his wrinkled skin and the fragility of the bones beneath his fingers. The constant beeping of the heart monitors was a cruel reminder of the battle Ricardo was fighting. Arthur watched his father's chest rise and fall slowly, driven by shallow breaths. The image of Ilara, smiling and acting with false concern, danced in his mind, a nauseating contrast to the scene before him. I'm here, Father, he whispered again, his voice choked with emotion. The tears he had held back for so long finally streamed hot and bitter down his face. I will take care of you. Guilt gnawed at him, so absorbed in his own business, in his own life, that he hadn't noticed his father's silent suffering, the evil growing under the same roof he considered his home, the opulence of the mansion, which once represented his success, now seemed like a monument to his failure, a stage where Ilara's cruelty prospered undetected. He remained by Ricardo's side for a few more minutes, engraving every detail of that moment into his memory. The promise he made was not just to his father, but to himself. He would no longer be the blind and complacent man. With a final squeeze of Ricardo's hand, Arthur turned to Dr. Helena. "Doctor, I need to go home to get a few things, but I'll be back as soon as possible. Please keep me informed of any changes." "Rest assured, Mr. Arthur. The team will be attentive." "Take care," she replied, with a look of genuine empathy. The drive back to the mansion was a blur. With each passing mile, Arthur's anger and determination solidified. The house, which once welcomed him with a luxurious embrace, now seemed cold and hostile. The front door opened to a heavy silence, broken only by the echo of his own footsteps. "Luro!" Arthur called out, his voice hoarse. From the cage in the living room, the parrot let out a soft chirp, as if recognizing the sadness in his tone. "Hide the bottle," he repeated softly, like a painful reminder and an echo of the truth. Arthur approached the cage, extending a finger to the bird. "You're the only loyal one here, aren't you, my friend?" he murmured, a sad smile on his lips. Luro tilted his head, his dark eyes fixed on Arthur's. Ilara wasn't home. A small part of Arthur felt a bitter relief. He wouldn't have to pretend for now. The mask of normalcy he would have to wear would be unbearable. He went straight to the bedroom he shared with Ilara. Every object, every piece of her clothing now seemed tinged with an aura of falsehood. He opened the bathroom door, his gaze fixed on the wastebasket. There it was, as he remembered, Ricardo's empty medicine bottles, hidden under tissues and other debris. Wearing gloves, Arthur carefully removed them, placing them in a transparent plastic bag. He needed irrefutable evidence for Dr. Mendes. As he searched, his eyes fell upon Ilara's small jewelry box. An impulse made him open it. Inside, among expensive rings and necklaces, he found a small diary. Curiosity, mixed with a pang of revulsion, made him pick it up. He leafed through the pages, and what he found made his stomach churn. They weren't just notes about shopping or social events. There were dates and observations about Ricardo's health, always followed by cold, calculating comments about how he was getting worse, or soon he wouldn't be a problem anymore. On one page, a sentence stood out: "The old man is weak, the medicine is gone. Soon the inheritance will be ours." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. Ilara's cruelty was not just an impulsive act, but a cold and premeditated plan. He photographed the relevant pages with his cell phone and placed the diary in the evidence bag along with the bottles. He left the room, feeling the weight of the evidence in his hands. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, was now a tomb of secrets and betrayals. Luro, from his cage, let out another chirp, as if approving of his discovery. Arthur grabbed his car keys. He had everything he needed for the meeting with Dr. Mendes. The legal battle was about to begin, and Arthur was ready to fight, not only for justice, but to honor his father's memory and the loyalty of the only true friend he had in the house, Luro the Parrot. The blindness had ended, and the vision, however painful, had finally arrived, and with it the strength to fight not only for his father's recovery, but also for the justice Ilara deserved. Arthur left the mansion, the transparent plastic bag with the empty bottles and the cell phone, with the diary photos weighing in his hands like an anchor of truth. The morning sun, which once seemed to promise a new day of prosperity, now revealed the coldness and desolation hidden beneath the facade of luxury. Each step towards the car was an affirmation of his new resolve. There was no more room for doubt or complacency. On the way to Dr. Mendes's office, Arthur's mind seethed. Ilara's words, her expressions of false concern, the flimsy excuses for Ricardo's worsening condition, everything now fit into a horrifying mosaic of manipulation. He felt like a fool, a blind man who had allowed evil to flourish in his own home. Rage was a fire burning in his chest, but it was a controlled, directed rage, fueled by the need for justice. He arrived at Dr. Mendez's office building before the scheduled time. Punctuality was one of his virtues, and today, more than ever, he needed it. The receptionist, accustomed to seeing him in business meetings, noticed the unusual seriousness in his demeanor. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur. Dr. Mendez is already waiting for you," she said, indicating the office door. Dr. Mendez was standing looking out the window when Arthur entered. He turned, and his eyes met Arthur's. There was no need for words at that moment. The urgency and gravity of the situation were palpable. "Arthur, good morning. Please have a seat." Dr. Mendez indicated the chair in front of his desk. Arthur placed the plastic bag and his cell phone on the table, the soft rustle of the plastic and the glow of the screen seeming amplified in the office's silence. "Dr. Mendez, I have more," Arthur began, his voice firm, but with a hint of tremor. He pulled the empty bottles from the bag. "These are my father's medicine bottles. I found them in Ilara's bathroom wastebasket, hidden." Dr. Mendez took the bottles, examining the labels and expiration dates. "This is good, Arthur. This is important physical evidence." "And there's more," Arthur continued, unlocking his cell phone and opening the photo gallery. "I found her diary. It's not an ordinary diary. They are notes about my father." He handed the cell phone to the lawyer, pointing to the pages he had photographed. Dr. Mendez took the device, his eyes scanning the cold and calculating phrases. The expression on his face grew darker with each line read. "The old man is weak. The medicine is gone. Soon the inheritance will be ours," Dr. Mendez read aloud, incredulity and repulsion in his voice. He looked at Arthur, seriousness now mixed with a pang of shock. "Arthur, this is devastating. This changes everything. It's not just negligence, it's premeditation. This is a virtual confession." Arthur nodded, feeling a knot in his throat. "I know. I couldn't believe what I was reading. With this, and the medical reports proving the deprivation of medication and its correlation with your father's worsening condition, we have a very strong criminal case," Dr. Mendez stated, his voice now laden with new authority. "Attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud. The accusations can be diverse and severe. That's what I want, Dr. Mendez. For her to pay for everything," Arthur said, determination hardening every feature of his face. "Right. The next step is to formalize the complaint. I will contact the police and the public prosecutor's office immediately. We need the hospital reports to be finalized as quickly as possible. Have you already spoken with Dr. Helena about the documentation?" "Yes. She said the team is aware of the suspicion and that everything will be documented for the case," Arthur replied. "Excellent. Arthur, it is crucial that you remain calm and discreet. Ilara cannot have the slightest idea that you know or what is coming. Any confrontation now could compromise the investigation and the collection of additional evidence if necessary. She might try to destroy evidence or flee. Don't worry, Dr. Mendez. Her mask is still intact for me. I won't give her the pleasure of knowing the charade is over until it's too late," Arthur promised, his voice icy. "Great. In the meantime, I will initiate divorce proceedings, but that will be a later stage after the criminal complaint is formalized and the investigation progresses. The priority is justice for your father." Arthur felt a relief mixed with a sense of weight. The battle would be long and arduous, but he was no longer alone. He had a competent lawyer, irrefutable evidence, and above all, the most powerful motivation: love for his father and the promise of justice. "Thank you, Dr. Mendez, for everything. It's my job, Arthur. And in this case, it's the right thing to do. Keep me informed about your father's condition, and remember, silence is your best weapon now." Arthur left the office, the sun still shining. But now he saw it with different eyes. Blindness had been replaced by a painful but necessary clarity. He had a plan, a purpose. Ilara's justice was coming, and he would be its instrument. He picked up his cell phone to call the hospital, to get news of Ricardo. With each passing second, the image of his frail father in the hospital bed spurred him on. The fight for Ricardo's life and Ilara's downfall had truly begun. In the car, Arthur dialed the hospital number. The sound of the call echoed in his ears, each ring a beat in his racing heart. São Lucas Hospital. Good morning, the receptionist's voice sounded. Good morning. I'd like to speak with Dr. Helena, please. It's Arthur, patient Ricardo Almeida's son, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a brief moment of waiting, and then Dr. Helena's calm voice answered. Arthur, good morning. I have good news. Your father spent the night stable. Today's tests show a slight improvement in his vital signs, and he is responding better to the medication. It's still a delicate situation, but we are optimistic. A sigh of relief escaped Arthur's lips. Thank God, that's wonderful, Dr. Helena. Is he conscious? Not entirely. But there have been moments of lucidity. He murmured your name a few times. It's a good sign. We will continue to monitor him closely. And regarding the documentation we discussed, our team is already compiling everything for you, she assured him. Thank you, Dr. Helena. Thank you very much for everything. I don't know what I would do without you, Arthur replied. His voice choked with emotion. We're just doing our job, Arthur. The important thing is that he's responding. Keep the faith, she said, and the call ended. The news about Ricardo brought a ray of hope to the darkness Arthur felt. His father was fighting, and he would fight for him. Arthur's determination solidified even further. He drove back to the mansion, his mind working on how to maintain the charade. Silence is your best weapon now, Dr. Mendez's words echoed in his mind. Upon arriving, Ilara's car was already in the garage. She had returned. Arthur took a deep breath, adjusting his mask of a blind, concerned husband. He entered the mansion, the heavy silence once again. Arthur, you're home early, Ilara's voice came from the living room. She was sitting on the sofa, leafing through a fashion magazine, a cup of tea beside her. Her expression was one of irritating tranquility. Yes, I had a quick meeting with Dr. Mendez. I wanted to make sure everything was in order with Father's lawyers, Arthur replied, his voice sounding more natural than he expected. He approached, sitting in the armchair opposite her. And how is he? Any news? Ilara asked, without lifting her eyes from the magazine, a tone of false concern in her voice that now sounded like poison to Arthur. Dr. Helena called. He's stable. There's been a slight improvement in his vital signs, Arthur said, watching her intently. She paused briefly, her eyes meeting his for a second, before returning to the magazine. A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps frustration, crossed her face, but it was too quick to confirm. Oh, that's good. I'm happy to hear that, she murmured without conviction. I thought he'd be worse, with everything that happened. Arthur felt a chill. The coldness of her words was shocking. He's strong. Always has been, he replied, keeping his voice neutral. Luro, from the cage, let out a soft chirp. Hide the bottle, he repeated softly, like a whisper of the truth that hung in the air. Ilara didn't seem to notice, or pretended not to notice, absorbed in her magazine. Arthur cast a glance at the parrot, a small, sad smile on his lips. Luro was his only visible ally, the silent guardian of a terrible secret. I'm going upstairs to take a shower. I've had a long day, Arthur said, standing up. He needed a moment to himself to shed the mask and breathe. All right, dinner will be served shortly, Ilara replied without looking up from her magazine. Arthur climbed the stairs, feeling the weight of the charade with every step. The air in the mansion felt dense, heavy with unspoken tension. He knew that the battle was just beginning, and that the hardest part would be to remain calm and discreet while Ilara continued to live in her bubble of lies. But he was ready for Ricardo, for Luro, and for the justice Ilara deserved. The wait would be excruciating, but the reward would be the truth. Upon reaching his room, Arthur closed the door behind him, feeling immediate relief at being alone. The mirror before him reflected a tired man with heavy eyes, but a new flame of determination shone in them. He took off his jacket, loosened his tie, and walked to the bathroom, where he turned the shower to full blast. The hot water beating on his skin was a balm for the tension accumulated in his shoulders. As the water streamed down, Arthur allowed himself to relive the day's moments, the empty bottles, the cold notes in Ilara's diary, Dr. Mendez's firm voice promising justice, and above all, Dr. Helena's news about his father's improvement. Ricardo was fighting. That was the strength Arthur needed to continue the charade. He remembered the lawyer's advice: silence is your best weapon now. Every word from Ilara, every gesture, would be observed and analyzed. He could not fail. After his shower, Arthur dressed in more comfortable yet still elegant clothes for dinner. The mansion, with its empty luxuries, now seemed like a stage for a dark drama. He descended the stairs, the mask back in place, his expression neutral, but his senses sharpened. Ilara was already in the dining room, sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, idly toying with her silver cutlery. A glass of red wine rested beside her. The soft light from the crystal chandeliers illuminated her face, but couldn't soften the hardness Arthur now saw behind her beauty. "Arthur, I thought you weren't coming," she said, a forced smile on her lips. "Dinner is served." "I just took my time in the shower. I had an exhausting day," he replied, pulling out his chair and sitting opposite her. The silence that followed was filled only by the occasional clinking of cutlery and the muffled sound of the city outside. "You seem pensive," Ilara commented, raising her eyes to him. "Still worried about your father?" Arthur nodded slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Yes, it's hard to see him like this. Dr. Helena said he's stable, but the recovery will be long and uncertain." He observed her reaction, a brief blink, a slight tightening of her lips almost imperceptible. "Ah, yes. Life is like that, isn't it? Full of uncertainties," she murmured, taking a sip of wine. "I just hope he doesn't suffer too much. It's the last thing we want for those we love." The hypocrisy in her words was a slow poison Arthur felt in his veins. "No, of course not," Arthur agreed, keeping his voice calm. "But he's a strong man, always has been." Loro from the living room let out a sharp chirp. "Hide the bottle, hide the bottle." The parrot's voice echoed, breaking the tense silence of the dining room. Ilara frowned, a look of irritation crossing her face. "That noisy bird. I need to see if we can't put him somewhere else. He's becoming unbearable." Arthur felt a chill. Her ignorance was almost as terrifying as her cruelty. "He's just a parrot, Ilara. He repeats what he hears," he said, a subtle warning tone in his voice that she didn't seem to catch. "Anyway," she changed the subject, "I thought about perhaps hiring a private nurse for your father when he comes home. Someone who can take care of him full-time. That way, you wouldn't have to worry so much." Arthur almost choked on his food. She was planning the next phase of her manipulation, perhaps to ensure Ricardo never fully recovered or to gain control over him. "It's an idea, but let's wait for him to recover a little more in the hospital. Dr. Helena has an excellent team." Of course," Ilara said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just thinking of your well-being, my love. You've been so stressed." The night dragged on, each minute an internal battle for Arthur. He responded in monosyllables, kept his gaze distant, his mind working tirelessly. With every word from Ilara, he saw the web of lies extend, and with every silence he felt the weight of the truth that was about to shatter her world. When dinner finally ended, Arthur excused himself early, citing tiredness. He retreated to the bedroom, the suffocating feeling diminishing slightly. The wait would be long, but with each passing day, Ilara's net tightened. He just needed to be patient. Justice, he knew, would come, and it would be relentless. The next morning, Arthur woke with renewed clarity. The charade had reached its limit. There was no more time to wait. He needed to act. He descended the stairs, finding Ilara in the living room as usual, leafing through a magazine and drinking her coffee. Luro was in his cage, watching them with his curious eyes. "Ilara, we need to talk," Arthur said, his voice firmer than usual, without the mask of blind concern. He carried a leather briefcase in his hands. She looked up, an eyebrow arched. "About what, my love? You sound serious." Arthur walked to the coffee table and placed the briefcase on it. He opened it, revealing Ricardo's empty medicine bottles and Ilara's diary. The silence in the room became heavy, almost palpable. "It's about my father," Arthur began, his voice low, but laden with contained pain and anger. "It's about your concern for him." Ilara looked at the objects, and an almost imperceptible tremor passed over her lips. Her eyes widened slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I don't understand, Arthur. What is this?" "Don't play innocent, Ilara," Arthur said, picking up one of the empty bottles. "This is the medication my father should have been taking. Where is it?" He threw the bottle on the table. "And this?" He picked up the diary, opening it to a marked page. "These are your notes. Ricardo sick, closer to the end. One less problem. Do you remember writing that?" Ilara's face paled. The forced smile vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and horror. This is absurd. I would never do such a thing. Someone must have planted this." "Planted?" Arthur laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. "Who? Ilara? Who would have an interest in doing that, if not you? You wanted my father sick. You wanted him out of the way to have total control of his fortune, didn't you?" "No! You're crazy. I love you, Arthur. I love your father." Ilara stood up, her voice choked, but Arthur saw the panic in her eyes. "Don't lie to me anymore, Ilara. I know everything," Arthur shouted, rage finally exploding. "I know you hid his medicine. I know you left him on the brink of death." Luro, who had been silent until then, let out a loud chirp. "Hide the bottle! Hide the bottle! Hide the bottle!" The parrot's voice echoed through the room, irrefutable proof, a sentence pronounced by an innocent witness. Ilara staggered back, her eyes fixed on the parrot, then on Arthur. The truth hit her with full force. There was no more denying it. She was cornered. "No, it's not true. He's just a bird." "He's the only loyal witness my father had, Ilara," Arthur said, his voice now laden with sadness. "He saw you. He told me. And now justice will see you too." At that moment, the mansion door opened, and Dr. Mendez entered, accompanied by 2 police officers. Arthur had made the call before coming downstairs. "Madam Ilara Almeida, we have a search and seizure warrant and an arrest warrant," one of the police officers said, his voice grave. Ilara let out a scream, a sound of desperation and fury. "Arthur, how could you? I'm your wife." "You are the woman who tried to kill my father," Arthur replied, his voice cold and distant. "And I am no longer the blind man you thought I was." As Ilara was led away, her screams and protests echoed through the mansion, but Arthur felt no pity. The pain of betrayal was deep, but the liberation was greater. Days later, Ricardo Almeida was more lucid in the hospital. Arthur was by his side, holding his hand. "Father, you're going to be all right. I promise." Ricardo squeezed his son's hand, a weak smile on his lips. "My son, my Luro." He saved me." Arthur smiled, tears streaming down his face. The mansion, now empty of Ilara's toxic presence, seemed to breathe again. Luro, in his cage in the living room, let out a soft chirp. Bottle. Saved. Arthur. Justice had been served. Ricardo would recover, and Arthur, though scarred by pain, would find peace. The truth, however dark, had finally come to light, and a parrot, the most unlikely of witnesses, had been the beacon in the darkness.